I was born and grew up in Tel Aviv in a traditional family, which meant in our case that we kept kosher. We did. My mother used to light candles on Friday evening before Shabbat started. We used to go to synagogue on Friday night, but not on Saturday morning. We did not observe Shabbat. More or less, this is it. Then, at around the age of 13, around my bar mitzvah, I became more observant, and which led later to move to a high school yeshiva, in which you study half a day religious subjects, mainly Talmud, and half a day high school. And after I finished that, I went to a high yeshiva, which was the Merkaz Rav Yeshiva, which is the yeshiva that was established by Rabbi Cook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, of the land of Israel. It was before the establishment of the state of Israel. And I think his teachings were the most influential thing, the most influential component in my understanding of Judaism. Then after I studied in the yeshiva some 5.5 years, then I completed army service and studied physics for first and second degree. And right now I'm completing a PhD in Jewish thought in cooperation with physics and some element of literature. I had during this period I had two charismatic people around me. One a teacher in the high school and a guide in the youth movement. And I think it's very difficult to look back at such an age, but I think it was some kind of deeper conviction that I should follow the rules properly. The way I see it, and I think it more or less reflects the self-understanding that I had then, was that I was stimulated by these two charismatic people to think about the issues, because before that I was just living like, how do you say, I was living life as I was used to live them. But they stimulated me to think about, to confront the question whether I am committed to fully follow the halakha or not. And when I faced this question, I went through what then seemed to me as a philosophical process of thinking whether I believe in God, in the fact that God gave the Torah to the nation of Israel, and I decided that I do believe in that, and therefore I have to follow what comes out of these beliefs. His main emphasis is that everything is interconnected and everything has its place and everything has its role in the worship of God. So unlike other approaches that you find mainly in Ashkenazi Judaism, that I think was influenced by Christians in that respect, that has some kind of dichotomy, not as strong as in Christianity, but there is a dichotomy between the physical world and the divine world. He emphasized very much the use, like the early Hasidic teachers, that the use of everything for the worship of God, and the need for everything. You cannot just be spiritual, you have to be also physical in order to worship God. And it goes on. When he refers to different opinions about anything, he would say that they all have a place in the bigger truth. So even, for example, he refers to to the political streams in his time that more or less continue to our time, which are, I mean, basically we can say that it's the left and the right and the religious streams. And he says all of them are part, like embedded in the bigger truth of Judaism, and so on. So he catches everything into the positive thing. Even there's even a story about I don't remember the exact details of the story, but the paradigm of badness in Judaism is Amalek, the nation of Amalek, which is like the other pole from Judaism. And there is a commandment in the Torah that says that you should extinct, is this the word? The extinct Amalek from below the sky. So there's a saying that even Amalek you should extinct only below the sky, but above the sky there's place also for Amalek. There is a development, and basically yes, it is the same. It's different and the same. I mean, it gets off. I mean, I don't believe now in the same way that I believed that I was in the age of 13, and there are other components that come in. But I think basically I do believe in the fact that what's reported in the Bible is true, that there was the event near Mount Sinai. Although in a sense it doesn't really matter so much if it really happened as an historical fact or not, because I do believe that the Torah comes from divine inspiration, and in any case, even according to the Talmud, not all the 5 books of Moses were given in the one occasion. It took, I think, nearly 2 years until everything was passed. God is the presence that contains everything, and actually, in a sense, it is contained also by everything. Everything is God. So everything has a divine nature, which is and the role of the humans is to expose this divine nature of everything. And this is why the Torah touches every aspect of life, because in every aspect of life and in everything you should be exposing this divine nature. And I think if you talk about truth from a human perspective, it goes to the difference between humans and God, because God is the only one who has the full truth. People always have partial truth, and therefore I go back to what Rabbi Cook says about the different opinions about everything, and it also connects to interfaith dialogue in a sense, because the basic approach is that since every person have only his own way of understanding truth, which is partial. It is true, but it's partial. So the best way to come closer to the ultimate truth is to collect as many points of view as possible. And only the combination of all of them and some kind of harmonization of all of them together brings you closer to the ultimate truth. When you talk about truth in human thinking, it's either a real understanding of the world or of God or of myself or of humanity, or which relates to that, what should I do as a result. So all of that is part of the the path of the human to reach God, because I mean everyone has to find his own way to come closer to God, and in order for that to happen, he has to understand the world and himself, and to understand what he has to do in order to come closer to God. Yeah, I mean the way I understand it, it's a little bit different when you talk about nations than when you talk about individuals inside one nation or within one nation. When you talk about nations, I mean nations are kind of how do you say, groups of people that act together. And the way I see it, the understanding of the Torah is that each nation has its own character and therefore has its own way to God. And the Jewish nation was chosen to get the full detailed manual, if you like, of how to get closer to God. But that's their role. And they, of course, have the role, because they were chosen for that, they have the role to serve an example to the rest of humanity of how to get closer to God, and how to build a whole society that all of it, with all its components and all its levels and all its elements, are directed together in this mission to come closer to God. But then the rest of the humanity, when they take the example from Judaism, they should not copy Judaism. So there's no understanding that everyone should become Jewish. Everyone should learn about Judaism, should draw inspiration from Judaism, but then everyone goes to his own context and creates his own way of worshiping God, with the limitation that everything is within the framework of the 7 commandments of the sons of Noah. Another aspect is the need to create harmony within humanity, which I think is one of the roles of the nation of Israel in this understanding. And I see that as part of my Judaism, actually, the need to build bridges between people and make people talk to each other and learn from each other. I don't think that I don't see any aim in bringing everyone together, in the sense that everyone will agree and that there will be some kind of joined hybrid religion that will be good for all. I don't think so. I think it's very important for everyone to follow, basically everyone to follow his own tradition and listen to others and maybe draw inspiration from others, but then go back to his own tradition and follow that and reach it maybe by listening to others. But I think conversions should be the exception, not the rule. There's a specific place where Rabbi Cook refers to this question, and he quotes other sources. I mean, there are many sources that say that on the individual level, there is not necessarily an actual difference between Jews and others. Everyone can come closer to God, and in many cases, non-Jews can be closer than other Jews. But he stresses that the main difference is on the national level, because the example that the Jewish nations should give to the other world is how to build a whole society that is worshipping God, that its economics worships God, its army worships God, its justice system worships God, and so on. And this is something that doesn't have much competition in other religions, because I think most religions don't go into the details of how to build a society. I think the closest is maybe Islam, that does go to a considerable amount of details. But still, I think that the Jewish halakha is more detailed. And even if it's not, I mean, this is the understanding that this is the task of Judaism. Of course, everyone, I mean, from the Jewish perspective, it will be said that the Islam followed the example of Judaism better than others. I mean, the way I understand the final aim of Judaism is not it includes a personal I don't know, enlightenment or salvation or something like that, but it is as part of the salvation of the whole of the world or the whole of the universe. It's not only the whole of humanity, but the whole of the universe. And the understanding is that by the act of creation, the world went away from God, which is okay, and then the role is it has to come back to God, and those who lead this way are the humans, and especially the Jewish nation. So the salvation of the individual is when the whole nation reaches salvation, and at the same time the whole of humanity and the whole of the universe reaches salvation. But on the other hand, I can also I can also expect individually to maybe to go a step further beyond the rest of humanity. It is possible, but also the individual capacity to come closer to God is limited by where humanity is. For example, there are stories in the Talmud about someone who was personally capable and worthy of being a prophet, like, I don't know, like Moses, but he could not make it because of the generation was at a lower level. The task is constant. Actually it's infinite. You always have to go further and further. Even if you make a leap and you are in a very much higher position, you can still go further, because it's like a mathematical process. I mean, reaching God is reaching infinity. It takes infinite time to make it. Just a custom that developed at some point. I don't really know, I'm not sure anyone knows exactly the origin. There is something in the Talmud that says that that commends someone who always covered his head in order to symbolize that God is above him. But it doesn't, as far as I remember there, it doesn't sound like it's something that everyone needs to do. It's just he had this idea and he did it, and it was a good idea, but not anything, not something that everyone have to imitate. Then some people say that it came because of anti-Semitism. I mean, anti-Semitic rulers that wanted to distinguish the Jews and force them to wear something on their head, and then they just got used to it. I don't know. I know that it is there. Once it's there, you cannot really ignore it. If you take it off, then you don't wear the head covering. So, and in Israel, this is what distinguishes this 25% of religious people from the other parts of society. But if you wear it, it means you belong to this 25%. If you don't wear it, it means you belong to the 75%. There's no way to go beyond this division. So although I don't like it, I don't see a point in not wearing it. there was a time that I studied the early Hasidic movement, and I think in parallel, or maybe a semester later, I studied Buddhism, and I found many parallels between the two, and I found myself many times explaining Jewish notions in Buddhist words, or giving Buddhist examples. So in a sense, I think I did find parallels between the two, and sometimes I prefer the Buddhist language. So there is the speculative answer for that, and I mean I did hear people who claim that the Jewish ideas were brought to India by the 10 lost tribes who were going on that direction and were lost and some kind of assimilated over there. I mean, I don't know if it's historically true. I don't know that there were connections and there were exchange of opinions. I think a deeper answer is that that of course God speaks, and I mean or let me say it in another way. I mean, God, every person has the potential or the ability to relate to God and to be in conversation even with God, and of course every nation. And I think in every nation there were people who were listening to God better than others, and they were hearing the same thing and interpreting it according to their own cultural context. But the message of God is the same. So it's not very surprising that there are similar components. I don't know. I mean, let's say that when I hear the stories about these Druze, young 7-year-old boy that goes to a village he has never been to in his life and knows exactly how to go into all these small streets and finds his wife, and then they found out that he was born one day after her husband was killed. All these stories, I don't see any reason for anyone to invent them, and I guess there is something in that. But this is the way I believe in it. I don't think that it's very clear in Judaism if you have to believe in it or not. I think that the biggest problem in Israel is that Jews and non-Jews don't meet. And the non-Jews are mainly Arabs, and don't meet. I mean, it's not that Jews many times go to Arabs to eat hummus, and Arabs, of course, have to interact with the Jewish majority, but there's no real meeting. There's no real conversation, real deep encounter between the two, and there's a friend of mine from Egypt many times says you always have a full picture about the other, and what you don't have in real information you complete with prejudices. And I think this is the main source for many problems in the Middle East. And once you do meet the other and you know the real truth about him, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, at least you have the real picture of the other. And this meeting of the real other makes him human to you. So I think that bringing Jews and Arabs together are the real way to come closer to peace, or to build peace. and you see it works, right? Many times people come for the first time, and you see the transformation of people who had many prejudices before, and suddenly say, "Wow, they are human." Sometimes they are even disappointed. They said, "Oh, they are very similar to us." I mean, you said you will bring you bring Arabs, but these Arabs are like us. They bring us the real Arabs, and it happens also between Israelis and Palestinians, and this is why I think that the conflict between the two is not very deep. It's kind of historical accident. So what I mean, another thing that I have to say about it, I think the interaction between people is extremely powerful in changing attitudes and in open hearts to one another, but it's very limited in numbers. So you have to always bring more and more people and expose more and more people to the other. And this is what I try to do. So we try to create a social movement, actually. And the way I see it, we work in three circles. The central circle, which is the basis for any other process in the Middle East, is the Jews and Arabs that are living in Israel. And then the second circle is the Israelis and Palestinians, and in the third circle are the rest of Israel and all the Middle East. When you talk about bringing people together in Israeli context, I think the main challenge that you have to face is to avoid political debates, because at least in Israel the political discourse is extremely superficial and extremely divisive, and I think there's no way to really bridge if you start from the political debate. And I always compare it to fans of football teams. There's no ability to really have a conversation and one convince the other that his team is better. It's unimaginable. But if you build good relations and you build a conversation before, then you can talk about everything. And I think after this process is massive enough, then finding political solutions will be much easier. I see interfaith dialogue as a peace builder. It's more a tool to build good relations between people than a tool to bring people closer to the worship of God. This is kind of, many times it's a secondary outcome. Many times people become engaged in interfaith dialogue and as a result become closer to their religion. But this is something else. I think like the basic thing that needs to be achieved is good relations between people. It's like there's a saying in the Mishnah, in the sayings of the fathers, that I don't know how to translate it exactly. The literal translation is the way of the earth, but the meaning is that like basic morality comes before the Torah, and it has two senses. One is historical, because the Torah was given only 2,000 years after the creation, but also in the conceptual sense that the basic good relations are like a prerequisite to real worship of God. You cannot really come closer to God if you are not close to your neighbor or your friend. I think there are two main ways. One is the way of silence. Then you can do exactly the same thing. You both do nothing, but do it together. And another way that I facilitated many times is witnessing the worship of the other. For example, when we organize weekend retreat, we always have a prayer session, which is optional. It's not, a mandatory part of the program. and we start with the Jewish prayer for the opening of Shabbat, and then with some explanation to the others, but we don't adopt it. We do it exactly like we do it in the synagogue, but we do it there, and others are invited to watch. And then in the same way, there's the Muslim evening prayer. In the same way, they explain what they do, but then they do exactly what they do in the mosque. They don't alter it in order to have some kind of interfaith context or something. No, they do what they do as themselves. Or another example is that once we had a kind of interesting retreat. It was, we entitled it an Abrahamic Buddhistic retreat, because we had contributions from Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. And in that retreat we had in the evening something that came out amazingly unique experience. We started with a kind of a Christian hymn which somehow moved. We planned it like 4 different sections, but they somehow flowed from one to another. So there was the Christian hymn, then a Jewish person led some of the special songs for Shabbat. Then there was a Sufi Muslim who led a Sufi zikr, and then everything concluded with a very quiet Buddhist meditation. And the uniqueness of this process was how everything was harmoniously joined together. But this is something that you cannot really plan in advance. I mean, what I did plan was the 4 sections, hoping that each one of the 4 will be inspiring for people, or at least presenting, giving a taste of the real thing to other people. And then if it happened that everything flowed and was very harmonious and very, so this is some kind of an extra value. Yeah. The problem with globalization is not that we have too much globalization, as the anti-globalization people say. The problem is that we have too less globalization. We have a very developed globalization in the economic field, but we don't have a developed globalization in other fields, in the moral field, in the spiritual field, in the religious field, in the just human solidarity field, and other aspects. So I came with this notion that we need to develop the human globalization. We have to understand that the whole of humanity is one network, and each part of it is part of a big network. In the very same way that it works with economics. So people not can relate, but are related to one another, and everything is interconnected. And I think once this is developed, I think also the economic field will go into proportions, because I think part of the bad aspects of the economic globalization is that it lacks the other elements that will create some balance. Your little questions are always very difficult to answer. I would say be truthful to yourself and to God. I think there are two sides of the same coin.